We have a weekend edition of Browns Film Breakdown for you. We're going to go through an exercise you might not love, but it will take you down memory lane. Some 25 years worth of decisions the Browns have made that we want to rank out some of the worst and then give you some of the best as well. So a fun weekend edition of the show coming up with Jared Mueller from Dogs by Nature right now. What's happening? Weekend edition. Happy to be here. It's Jake. It's Jared Mueller. We're here to do an off-season exercise that I thought was going to be interesting. It's actually a year off, Jared. So they came back in 99, but I thought 25 bad decisions that defined the 25 years, it's a quarter century of Browns football has happened, a little over that now, since they've come back. And let me tell you, we listed bad things, and these are just like decisions that the front office has made. Whether that's somebody being hired or somebody being, a decision on a draft pick or a free agency signing or any number of things. It's basically front office ownership related. So the 25 worst things to happen to the Browns since 1999. And again, it's not really. So like an example would be, I had somebody say to me, well, what about Dwayne Rudd and the throwing the helmet? Well, we're not looking at like plays on the field so much, like individual circumstantial moments, more as like the worst front office or ownership decisions. So there you go. There's a lot. You can be pretty generic here and be like every GM leading up to Andrew Berry, or some people now at this point don't like Andrew Berry, but that's neither here nor there. But like, we're trying to hit some specific things. So, I mean, this isn't the most fun journey down memory lane, but it's also kind of just fun weekend fodder. And then we got some good decisions too, Jared. So, I mean, I'm interested to see what we come up with.
Well, I'm going to give you guys the behind the scenes a little bit. Jake reaches out to me on, let's just say Tuesday. Hey, you want to do this? Sure. I dork it up and make a Google sheet. I throw in about 5 or 6 just as like, let's get these in there. These are the ones right off the top of my head real quick. And about an hour later, Jake has 30. I put it up on Dogs by Nature as kind of a community conversation. And there's like 50 comments on it over there as well. So Jake, definitely, it was his idea. And then I think he hit all the big ones really, really quickly after I took the easy layups. So definitely seems like you had some locked and loaded frustrations as you were getting this list ready.
There's so many. I mean, listen, let's just rattle off. Like, I'm not going to go into detail because most of you will know these before, any explanations necessary. We'll give you a little more explanation if it lands inside the top 25. Let's put it that way. Here's the list. A couple things. We're going to tie 2 things into one for both of these. So I think we would say Deshaun Watson, the contract and the trade. And then we would say the Hugh Jackson experience, both the hiring of him over Sean McDermott and the decision to keep him around in 2018. And I'm just kind of going down the list here. I think you can deduce those are the top 2 things that came to mind. Mm-hmm. Then we go into the Julio Jones trade. Then we go into drafting Justin Gilbert. Well, trading up to draft Justin Gilbert. Drafting Johnny Manziel. Trading for veterans like Corey Williams, Sean Rodgers, and leaving the team's top pick in the 4th round that season because they got so aggressive. Selecting Gerard Warren. Hugh Jackson over Sean McDermott. Okay, we did the Hugh Jackson, but bringing in Todd Haley in 2018 to sort of sneakily be the next guy when Hugh failed, drafting Brandon Whedon. And then we could say the failure in the end zone script of it's like Dog Pound was misrepresented. It was like Gapod. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but you'll know it when you see it. And then we could obviously talk about some other things from that ESPN article, such as hashtagging DP and then putting those tweets up on the wall. I think that's self-explanatory. Continuing down the list, Dwayne Bowe. Freddie Kitchens is hired. Ray Farmer's text scandal on the sidelines, from the press box texting down to the sidelines. Letting Kyle Shanahan leave. Courtney Brown's injury history and still selecting him first overall. Not letting Baker Mayfield have a 5th-year option season. Mitchell Schwartz and Alex Mack being allowed to leave without a franchise tag. The Brady Quinn controversy, both in the selection and the trade. More so the selection. Paul D. Podesta's hiring. John Dorsey's hiring. Jimmy Haslam purchasing the team. Barkevius Mingo selection. Pat Shurmur and Rod Chudzinski hires. The William Green selection. George Kokonis, Ray Farmer, Mike Holmgren, hiring Ken Dorsey, sitting Tim Couch in 1999, the Odell Beckham trade in general, DeMario Davis for Calvin Pryor, sneaky one there. Alex Shiner gave the trashiest uniforms with the Browns running down the leg. That's courtesy of our boy Seth, Wreck This League. Not forcing Baker Mayfield to sit in 2021, the hiring of Joe Banner, Jim O'Neill, buddy of,
Mike Pettin.
At the time, Mike Pettin, being allowed to be the defensive coordinator, not selecting Tristan Wirfs, Danny Shelton and Cameron Irving selections in the first round, and then just the entire 2016 draft. Okay.
That's all, guys. Like, that's all. It's not even close, right? Like, at some level, as we went through this, I'm like, there are layers to all of these, right? Like, every bit of it. Like, DeMario Davis ended up being a terrible trade, but he wasn't that good when we had him and wasn't that good before we had him, but it was a terrible trade, right? Like, but there's just so many layers to everything. Kyle Shanahan and Johnny Manziel are linked together, right? Like, everything that goes with that. And, John Dorsey, there are some people who will be very, very clear about firing John Dorsey was a terrible decision, and others will say hiring John Dorsey was the terrible decision, right? And so I think what's interesting is, the nuance of from some of these are just so easy, just very big and easy and all that, to all the like minuscule or little, butterfly flaps its wings kind of thing. If somebody else besides Jimmy Haslam purchased the team, right? A local person, whatever, right? It was just amazing. I'm going to start off where I know where you want to rank them. I think the real question is it based on dumbest decision? Because that's interesting. The one that angers me, probably not the most, but it's the stupidest, I think, was that Jim O'Neill did not have gap integrity. And I don't know why that bothers me so much, because it feels like football 101, right? Like, the linemen have some gap responsibility, so they know what the linebackers are doing. Like, that feels like defense 101, and for some reason has pissed me off to no end, because a lot of these other decisions, not all of them, like, okay, I can find a smidge of logic. Barkevius Mingo was athletic, at least, right? Like, defensive and offensive line, Danny Shelton, Cam Irving, at least they're building the lines. That one, there's just not a shred of logic to it. So it's the weird one that I probably would have in my like top 5-10 that other people are like, yeah, Jared, that's not that impactful. You're right. It's just the dumbest one.
I think it's an interesting thing to be like dumbest at the time with obvious evidence, or just what worked out the worst, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a balancing act you're trying to do here, which is very tricky. So I don't know. This isn't a defined thing so much as to be like, these are kind of a mixture, a hybrid of worst decisions made and just kind of like worst things to happen to them in the last 25 years. Because what I would do is we have two things filled out, which is the Deshaun Watson trade and contract. Do I think it is ultimately was it the dumbest thing at the time, chasing a better quarterback on the surface? No, I think you can really get lost in the sauce of forgetting everything that came with that, being as far removed as we are right now, what it did to the fan base division, a lot of that, driving stuff happened. But at the core of the choice of, hey, we think we want to do better at quarterback, that's semi-understandable here, right? So, but you also have to balance, like, look what this did to the fans, look what this has done to the team. It closed their window. It's crushing them then, now, and into the future. So you just kind of can't say that's not the worst. I think you could argue a couple things. There are 3 leaders in the clubhouse.
Okay.
It's probably number 1, 2, and 3 in some order is Jimmy Haslam buying the team. I think at the time you would say, hey, this guy's a minority owner of the Steelers who have had clear success in his time there. He has a lot of money. But we know now how inept he is at this. Yeah. And I still think, although the meddling has died down from where it used to be, from the days of posting the inappropriate hashtag on the cafeteria wall. I still think he's really bad at this. And he's been bad at it from the minute he stepped into Cleveland. Now, there are some things he does well. He'll spend money. He's going to build a new stadium and fund half of it. That's argued. I get it, but he is putting money into that. He's pouring money into Berea. The fact is that he will burn cash on the roster for good or bad. So there's some good there, but there's like the results have been bad. He buys the team from, I believe it was Randy at the time, because Al had passed away, giving the team to Randy. So if we're just doing the worst things that happen, I don't remember, Jared, maybe you do. Who else maybe was flirted to buy the team back in 2012, if there was any other bigger connections? But the results of Jimmy Haslam's leadership and processes have been really rough. Really rough.
I mean, you look at most of the decisions on here, they're under him, right? Obviously, even there are some that are not, but many of these decisions are under his leadership. And so, you know, it does play a role. You know, back in 2012, I wasn't as plugged in, but it didn't. You almost got the sense, different than today, you almost got the sense that there wasn't a ton, that there wasn't a lot of people out there thinking sports teams was a great place to spend money. It almost seemed like everybody thought local was all that mattered. Like people bought their local teams, whereas now you have, you know, these mega businesses and billionaires buying whatever teams available kind of thing. Back then it felt a little bit more like you should, or you had to have a tie to the area or a tie to a team to invest money, because it may not make money. They didn't really, you know, it didn't have that same feel that you had now, right? And maybe even the last, you know, 10-ish years of like, this is going to be a moneymaker one way or another. So, but I wasn't as tied in then to what that looks like. You know, you fast forward a little bit, probably 5 years later or so, Dan Gilbert would have bought the team, right? Like he would have been in a place, he would have been invested in Cleveland a little bit more, you know, all of those kind of things. And he would have seen where things were going. A Dan Gilbert led Browns team, I would have felt a whole lot better about, which I'm not sure how I feel about saying those words out loud.
I'm with you. I'm with you. It's tricky because, again, if you get too deep into the weighing of right time, not many people were very bothered by Jimmy Haslam buying the team based on who he was and where he was at in Pittsburgh and his connection to winning. But as we've grown in the experience, it's quite obvious that it's one of the worst things to happen to the team since they've returned. Not that they were very good in the years leading up to his purchase by any means, but we can agree. I mean, the over season happens under his tutelage. The embarrassing stories happen under his tutelage. And even though they found some modicum of consistency from like 2018 to 2023, we've seen what they did unraveling all of that with the Watson move that he was an anchor in. And obviously, you know, his impact on last year's coaching staff that we know about. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough.
And it's really interesting you say it that way, because you look at those three decisions. So we're talking Deshaun Watson, Hugh Jackson, and Jimmy Haslam. Everybody celebrated Jimmy Haslam coming from the Steelers, really, really wealthy, a Midwest guy, you know, Tennessee, whatever, loves football, loves Tennessee Volunteers, might have brought in Peyton Manning, you know, but loves the team, you know, loves the area, loves the sport. Steelers, Deshaun Watson, 5 teams, not just the Browns, right? We can LOL the Browns because they're the ones that ended up guaranteeing the contract, but 5 teams were basically going to put themselves in that situation. Maybe a little bit less on the contract. And then Hugh Jackson, you go back to that year when he was hired, and I think all the major publications had him as the top hire, the top decision. The Giants got screwed, you know, or failed to get their top guy. And I forget who else. There was one other team that was really in on Hugh Jackson. So you look at all 3 of those decisions, they didn't work out, but all 3 were lauded, not just by Cleveland fans who want to hope, they were lauded nationally. And so it's kind of very Cleveland that lauded nationally, complete and abject failure.
But it's funny that at the time you can justify all 3 of them to an extent. But what has happened is, as they've gone on, Jimmy included, just can't make enough right decisions. It's not all bad decisions, but he just can't make enough right ones. and that trickles into keeping Hugh. Like, the idea in hindsight doesn't look great, and that's largely because the Bills decided to take Josh Allen, and that miracle worked out for them, right? It worked out in a big way. That's probably why Sean McDermott still has his job. But the Browns chose Hugh over McDermott at the time with the split analytics old school group decision, and they went with the owner's decision to bring in to bring in Hugh Jackson. So I again, not wrong at the time, but then 2018, you got a chance to start fresh, new quarterback, first pick. They keep him longer than they needed to keep him. Yep. It's the same thing with Deshaun Watson. They've kept holding on to the belief as more proof has shown up that he can't do it, that they're doubling down on the mistake. So we've seen it.
And
so, yeah.
And not to talk politics, but it has a political word to it. It's called the incumbent theory. People really struggle going against what they've already done. It's why, in general, all incumbents or most incumbents win a lot of, especially the major elections, is because not enough people are willing to say, well, I voted for this person this year, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, it doesn't really matter. And now I'm going to do something different because then I'm invalidating my previous decision. And so Jimmy Haslam, who by hook or by crook has been a successful businessman, is like, no, it works, right? Having a GM and a coach report to me, not to each other. That works, even though it's been proven not to work. And I still hate it for Stefanski and Barry. It worked for him, he thinks, in business, so he's going to keep doing that, right? Because competition breeds success or something. But it's that incumbent theory of, if I've done it before, I've got to stick to my guns because I was probably right the first time, and it just needs more time. It must be. But then he didn't do that with, I don't know, 10 GMs and 10 head coaches, right? So it's really interesting where he chooses to do that and where he has chosen not to.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, spot on. Okay, so those are the big three, and I don't really think anyone can argue those. Maybe you can if you're a little. I mean, I can admit, Jared, that I was 10 when they came back in 99. Like, there's a weak spot here to some of the stuff in the first 10 years of the 21st century for me. So, again, recognizing that weakness. There's also, go ahead.
I'm a little bit older than you. That's a weakness for me as well, a little bit, because that's college Jared and young adult Jared, and all that person cared about was girls and having fun. So, like, football was an enjoyable thing one day a week. Now it's it's a thing every 2 seconds of my life, and has been for about 10 to 15 years.
Well, let's do it this way, because I think this is probably just the best way to do it. Is you take one, then I'll take one. So you've got, we're taking the Hugh Jacksons off the board here. We will take away all of the stuff around Jimmy Haslam's purchase, and then Deshaun Watson's. So yeah, you're up. You can make a case for any of these, and then I will. And then I don't know. People will argue. The fun in this is that you're going to disagree with us probably. So, we'll see. Go ahead. What you got?
Yeah, that's a good. Honestly, for me, it's I think it really needs to be Kyle Shanahan escaping. I think it set up too many
really
things.
Good answer.
Yeah, like, he's a great coach and all that, but it also set up that you can get out and it doesn't really matter. And you don't have to be held accountable and responsible, as opposed to actually listening to him and going, you know what, this guy actually has the balls, the guts to bring these things up. We may not just promote him to head coach because he's done this, but instead someone who has the guts to do that, let's make him more impactful, more a part of the process. Let's make sure we're holding each other accountable in our decision making. This person has been a part of the NFL all of his life.
Well, think about it this way. What year? So they keep him around in 14, and he leaves for Atlanta in 2015. Quickly hired over there, and it's like, well, how could you see that Shanahan was gonna be who he became? Those 2 years, then goes to the 49. Well, the Rams did this with McVay. McVay was like 32. Was he? He was maybe hired at 30. Take that back. He was hired at 30. They were all in, and they were laughed at for that decision, but they got it right, and they landed one of the smartest offensive minds for the next decade in football. And the Browns had that in-house, but they believed in Mike Pettin. They wouldn't give him the leeway he wanted. and let him make the decisions that he needed to make. And now look at him in San Francisco. So you can say, hey, at the time, but your job is to figure it out ahead of time. That's their job. And they didn't do it.
Yep.
So I think that's a fair one to have near the top. A fair one.
So where are you going next? I'm intrigued.
There's a lot of domino effect stuff here. Man, it's almost hard to not say like Joe Banner, Mike Holmgren, Ray Farn, like all those GMs just melt together. So it's really hard to not, like, you know what I'm saying? Like ranking those is really tricky because they were all really bad.
When you look at them, though, were any of them bad decision? Like, were any of them worse decisions at the time? Like, we called it then kind of decisions. If they all turned out horrible anyways, like, were there any that you like think were bad at the time?
Wasn't Kokonis, who again, I was in college. Wasn't that one an awful one in 2009? I remember that one being laughed at pretty heavily. And then the result of some of the things that transpired in his time here that have been talked about behind closed doors for a long time.
Haven't been talked about at all. What are you talking about?
It's tricky. It's very tricky. But I'm gonna pivot. There's a lot of things in the recent era that I want to nail down. And I think the Odell trade really crushed it. Like, I think the Odell trade was a really big domino that led to a lot of the Baker Mayfield issues. And just think about how the relationship turned with Mayfield. Think about losing the pick that was Dexter Lawrence that they needed, on top of losing Zeitler, a really competent guard, on top of losing Peppers, all to go get Odell. And if you think like about where Odell's career went here, and I'm not blaming it all on Odell, but I am saying like what happened between the dissension of him and Baker and never finding the same page. And like, it was just a really big domino that I think was a massive part of what led to misplaced trust in the result of the 21 season, is in my opinion, what ultimately led to them getting eager to go get Deshaun Watson. So I'm going to say that the Odell failed trade is a pretty big failure when you look back on that.
Well, and I also think as you kind of talk through that, it also changed, the Baker Mayfield trajectory, if you would. Like, he was developing, he was growing. And then it was, I want to win championships with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. So I hear you. I think that there's a lot in there that plays a huge role.
Yeah. Right, you're
up. To be honest, and this is the one where I already kind of mentioned that was people are going to be on both sides. I think it's John Dorsey. There's a lot of other things you could definitely play in here, but it also, when you look at Freddie Kitchens, all the different things that kind of go together, the reality is out of that draft class where John Dorsey had the most draft assets ever, basically, Baker Mayfield was good here. Is still, I'm just going to be honest, he's still good in Tampa Bay. I don't know what some people think. Is he top 15? Maybe. Probably not top 10, right? So Baker's good. Denzel is very good. Nick Chubb was great. I think that it's done then, right? Like, there was like 12 picks and 5 of them were in the top 40 or 50 or 60, whatever it was. One was Chad Thomas, Callaway was in there. There were so many draft assets. And I'm not sure if anyone, you could have thrown a dart and probably hit as well as John Dorsey did during that draft. And I know a few things that I shouldn't know, right? He was going to draft Lamar Jackson at 33. I know that. He wanted to draft Rashard Penny when he picked Chubb. Was it 32? Actually, I think there was a pick missing.
No, because it was Corbett. Then I think it was Corbett first.
Yeah, it was Corbett. That's where he would have picked Lamar Jackson. And he wanted Rashard Penny instead of Nick Chubb. The Seattle Seahawks happened to take Penny in the first round at like 28 or 29 or whatever it was. And so at some level, like, he got lucky there as well, right? And so now, did he do some good things? Sure, but he blew cap and he blew draft assets that are just ridiculous. Now, we have to be honest, Sashi Brown was not great either, but a lot of those 14 draft picks, there was a lot of them more in that 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round kind of thing. So John Dorsey is going to be my number. I think we're at 6.
Yeah, I think the Dorsey thing is like, it speaks to the feet on both sides of the fence that
Mhm.
you've seen from Jimmy Haslam, where it's like, okay, we're all in on this approach with Sashi Brown. We're going to gather assets. We're going to try to cash them in. Then it's like, oh, we don't really trust that truly data-driven approach. So we're going to pivot. And then we're going to pivot away from John Dorsey and bring back in more of a data-driven guy in Andrew Berry. That's that the Dorsey thing in the middle of that. And that's not to say everything from Dorsey was bad. And I know you've said that too, where it's like I mean, what we've seen Baker Mayfield kind of turn it around. Baker had good times in Cleveland. This is not all bad. And like, obviously Nick and obviously Denzel and some choices around there. So I get it. But I think that what John Dorsey to me represents is a lack of cohesive vision organization. And that trickles back to our number 3, Jimmy Haslam buys the team. And it's just, it sort of serves as a very interesting sort of, it just was such a wild choice in the middle of the data-driven thing they're trying to do in the 16-17 era, then going back to it so hard again in 2020 and into where we are now, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even as you kind of talk about that, like, it's why Mary Kay Cabot has me blocked, because she wrote an article that said the Browns want to bring, before they hired John Dorsey, the Browns want to bring in someone above Sashi Brown. And I'm like, what? That's more football guy. And I'm like, and I just literally is like, this is stupid. Like, it's dumb. You either are in for analytics and all that, or you're not. But Sashi Brown cannot have someone come and report over him with a totally different philosophical nature. That doesn't work. And a football guy can't be brought in under, like, whatever. Like, you'd have to, like, you'd have to have some uniformity to it. And so, and I think, even if I was being honest, I would say it's John Dorsey / Sashi Brown, just because neither, like, it was set up, like you're talking about, to kind of fail because it wasn't given the runway to kind of make it their own.
And there are people who do a great job of being football guys and very welcome to the data, very much trying to melt that together. And John Dorsey was the furthest from that. And if you listen to anybody who was around the organization then and what he did to the people that were working under Sashi, it was a complete avoidance
The
of
funny
all of
thing,
it.
though, is he loved Spark scores.
Yeah. Yep.
Like,
Yep.
that's a data point, but he acted like it was somehow uniquely not.
It just is on brand. Okay. I'm pivoting to one I didn't even list, but I thought of this
Nice.
as a whole Tim Couch thing, because what I wrote the other day, Jared, was about the depth of the Browns being what they're trying to lean into at the offensive line and building meaningful depth. And I was looking at when they came back, the expansion draft, and most people know the story. Terry Pluto wrote a really good book on how the NFL screwed over the Browns when they were
Absolutely.
coming back because of the results of the Panthers and Jags and how quickly they became competent. And like, what I found is that from 99 to 2006, they did draft a slew of really bad ones in the expansion draft, and a couple guys signed in free agency at a lower tier, but they didn't invest in offensive line seriously from 99 to 2006. In 2006, they ended up signing LaCharles Bentley, the top free agent, and then we know what happened with his staph infections and stuff like that. He never really played. But 2006, they decide to really lean into it. Then 2007, we know they draft Joe Thomas. But like from 99 to 06, the highest non-center they took, I think, was in the 4th round, maybe 5th round.
Jeez.
They didn't draft offensive linemen. So that was a huge part of what happened to Tim Couch and his ability to withstand hits. And it happened to Kelly Holcomb, and we saw other guys like Trent Dilfer and aging veterans like Jeff Garcia came in and tried to do it. It was like they just ignored any serious commitment of assets until like 06 was Steinbach came in from the Bengals. Then they got Joe Thomas, and then they were kind of moving in the direction. There was like the Ryan Tucker happened in that era too,
Sure.
but there just was not like a serious commitment to that. And then they drafted Alex Mack in 09, and Schwartz hit in, I think, 2011 or 2012 as a second rounder, but they were just not doing, they were drafting defensive linemen. They did draft Jeff Fain, the center, in I think 03, but that did not pan out. As we know, he did not have a very good career at all. So it just like was a genuine ignorance to the importance of an offensive line that helped make the life easier for, so it's really like tying Tim Couch, what happened to him, and the Browns' decisions at O-line kind of into one. But I think that mistake is a huge part of why that all went for Tim the way it did, and their inability to keep Kelly Holcomb in a good spot and those veterans they brought in too. So, and it also played a part in why they couldn't develop meaningful run game for a while until that like Jamal Lewis 07 era type thing when they started to put it together. But you can see a very clear shift from 06 to like 2012 of like, oh, we need to really commit assets to this offensive line. So yeah, that's a huge early portion of the post 1999 era they screwed up.
Yeah. I want to go with something else just because we're on offensive line, but I think I'm going to hold off on that for just a second. And I think, just to be honest, we're going to combine Justin Gilbert and Johnny Manziel, because I think the reality is that they have to be connected. And the reality is
the 14 draft, I think.
I think so. I was actually so little Jared, trying to be a part of the media, was actually at Radio City Music Hall for this. My brother, car company, gave me a free rental of a Prius, and I drove all the way to New York City and drove around New York City in a Prius and learned where you couldn't park. It was a really fun experience. And I was literally the only person in Radio City Music Hall not celebrating when the Browns selected Johnny Manziel. Everyone was celebrating. And I'm going to add on top of that, because this is obviously not a decision. I was walking to day 2. I think there was only 2 days at the time. I can't remember. And as I'm walking, Josh Gordon is on ESPN radio talking about the Browns and Johnny Manziel and how they are going to just destroy things. Josh Gordon was suspended before that round started. It was the most like, what in the world is going on here? So I think combining those two, again, Justin Gilbert is the more egregious mistake, selected at number 8, Johnny Manziel. But again, they didn't really scout with either of the players the way they should. It was another sign of just poor planning and, we'll give Mike Pettin this pick, and then we're going to give the owner the next pick. Like, stupid. Like, it's just dumb. I mean,
it's an interesting pivot point because that's the draft Shanahan wanted, Derek Carr, right? Yep. He had Teddy Bridgewater and Carr as guys he would have selected. That was pretty publicly out there. And then you also look at like picks around these guys. I mean, you're talking Mike Evans goes 7, then Gilbert, then Anthony Barr, who had a really great career as a linebacker in the league. You had a Pro Bowl tight end in Eric Ebron, Taylor Lewan. We know the success Lewan had in Tennessee. That's when Odell goes 12th. Aaron Donald, might have heard of him. He ends up going 13th. And then it's on and on with the best guard right there. Joel Bitonio is the best guard of the post 2010s, but then Zach Martin is the best, he would be that if it weren't for Zach Martin. He goes 16th, etc. The list goes on and on. So it's just like there are going to be probably 4 or 5 Hall of Famers that come out of that draft, and you come out of that with Gilbert and Manziel. And it was, the Ray Farmer thing is tied into that. It was just a really awful run of choices. And on top of it, the goofiness of like, hey, this homeless person said something to the owner. And it was just a laughing stock run of choices in that 14 draft.
And even you talk about Teddy Bridgewater, their analytics said he should be the pick. Right. They paid $100,000 to not trust it. How do you have 2 first-round picks and neither of them play a total of 3 seasons? Like, the odds of that have to be staggering. Like, I don't know what they are, but they have to be staggering. So yeah, we'll throw Gilbert and Manziel in as our number 8 worst decision.
Right. I like it. The next one I'm going to do, number 9, is pretty simple. I just think it was hiring Freddie Kitchens. It was just an impulse choice that, based on 8 games as an offensive coordinator, when they fired Hugh and Haley in that 18 season, they wanted to go with it. And it was just so abundantly obvious that he couldn't do it. I get it. And I was swept up in it, but I don't know Freddie Kitchens as a professional coach and his ability to lead people. And like, when I get a text from people at Veets down there at the Senior Bowl that says Freddie Kitchens is absolutely hammered right in front of all of us,
and just tripped over the curb,
this is like a sign, man. So yeah, I mean, Freddie, good old boy. I think he's with down at North Carolina now on Belichick's staff. But it was obvious if you got to know the aspects behind it about who Freddie was. And I remain perplexed how they know him as well as they did and thought that choice was going to work out. So, yeah, I mean, that hire really took a really stellar back half of Mayfield's rookie year, turned him into a player that couldn't trust what he was seeing and really did real damage to him in his second season. Now, I think Kevin's offense was good for him and helped turn him around the second half of that 2020 season. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that what Freddie did to that group in that year was pretty disastrous. So I think it was just pretty obvious. And it's ironic at the time they had interviewed Kevin for the job before that season they hired him. That year they hired Freddie, they'd also interviewed, and the analytics group liked him. They liked him a lot. So, you know, if you consider the Hugh decision over McDermott and you include that one there, it's not the irony doesn't miss us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that, from what I understood at the time, they believed they could not do anything but hire Freddie or keep Greg, right? Like the Greg Williams or Freddie Kitchen. They felt like the fans would not be okay with it. And that really led to just, again, a poor decision, because you're not making a decision based on intelligence, right? You're not basing it on what's good for the team. You're basing it on factors that don't freaking matter, right?
Yeah.
For me, number 10, I get to have 10. I'm actually going to throw Mitchell Schwartz and Alex Mack leaving in 2015. The Cleveland Browns had an identity, whether it was the best identity in the world, whether it was going to work, whether it was enough offensive weapons, I don't know. But it actually spread, from what I understand. And I think Mitchell Schwartz has said this, like the two of them and the process, you know, Mac signing the transition tag and then, you know, them matching it and yada, yada, yada. The reality of Schwartz and Mack is they did not speak well of the Browns when they left. And it did not make sense to draft a right tackle in the second round, let him leave after 4 years when he was really, really good. And so the Browns lost their identity in 2015.
Think about it, Jared. They were Joe Thomas, Greco, Alex Mack, all the way, and Bitonio had been there now 2 years after the 15 season.
That was Greco and Wright. Yeah.
And Bitonio left, and then your right tackle's Mitchell Schwartz. They had it, dude. That 14 offensive line was phenomenal. And if you just keep both of those guys, and then you go into the, you know, I understand 15 was a disaster because of the John DeFilippo experience they went through, but you like having that offensive line in place to take on a rookie quarterback, like at the time it could have been either one of Carson Wentz, right, or Jared Goff. You would have been putting yourself in a real position for those guys to come in and succeed. Like there's just a world where after the 14th season, they say, screw it, we're going to commit to Kyle Shanahan. He's going to be our guy. 15 is probably rough as they work through that transition. But then it's like in 16, trade the house for Jared Goff and let's go get it figured out. Like they could have done, it could have been a world where Goff was your quarterback in 16 as a rookie. And I'm not saying Goff has been but I mean, you can see how competent he's been just in terms of, you know, there are people that argue about what the ceiling is. I get it, whatever. But what I'm just saying is like, there's a world where Goff's your quarterback and then you have that offensive line and you have Kyle Shanahan leading your organization. And who knows where that goes over the next 5 to 7 years, but they let those guys leave. They let them leave, tore down the O-line and tore everything down to the studs. That's what they did. And they missed on the guy they should have committed to. All right. That's 10. That's part 1. We're going to take a break, come back on another show and talk through part 2 with you. So thanks for being here for part 1, Jared, and I appreciate you very much. All right. We will be back again. Like I said, until then, thanks for being here and go Browns.